and welcome to the Sustainability Uncovered podcast from EDie, the show for anyone working in or passionate about sustainability and climate action. Coming up on this month's show, how are businesses supporting nature restoration and conservation across the UK's national parks? We ask experts on the ground in the South Downs National Park.
And that's our USP, is that it's very bottom up, it's very locally focused, and we want to create woodland that's not just there to chuck it in and that'll do some carbon, thanks very much. It's about leaving a real legacy in that landscape.
Could an era of greenwashing in the beauty industry finally be drawing to a close? We speak to the team behind a new industry-wide environmental labelling scheme, EcoBeautyScore.
Primarily wanting to avoid, what we have seen happen in other industries like the food industry, the apparel industry, where there's been a proliferation of different labels that have cropped up, each with different methodologies, each with a different way of communicating to consumers, which doesn't help anyone.
All of that and more coming up on Sustainability Uncovered. Yes, hello and welcome to the Sustainability Uncovered podcast from EDie. It is coming up to the end of October 2025 and you're listening to the voice of EDie's content editor, Sarah George. Joining me in the EDie podcast studio in West Sussex are our editor, Matt Mace.
Hello.
And our senior reporter, Sidhi Mittal.
Hello.
So, lovely to see everyone all in the same place. I feel like it's definitely been a month where we've all been a bit all over the place, partly because Matt's been off and without him everything sort of falls apart. So good to catch up with you. What's been keeping you two busy this month?
Yeah, well, you said I've been off. I had some annual leave and it was a case of use it or lose it. So I had a staycation, very climate conscious staycation. No flights for me. But back at work, we've obviously had our Net Zero Awards this month. So we got to celebrate the kind of best of the best when it comes to decarbonisation across the UK. It was really nice venue at the brewery in London and a really nice event, and it was just good to see so many entries and award winners in different areas of decarbonisation, from innovation to the people that are driving it. So that was fun as well, and internally we've just been building up for a lot of stuff that's on the way, which I'll touch on later, but also what we've just launched is the ED 100, which I'm very excited to say we are going to crown the UK's 100 most impactful sustainability lead. So people can nominate themselves or a colleague to be part of that cohort. It's a free entry aspect, and we're there to really showcase that actually there are some really strong, passionate people that are acting as a driving force for good in sustainable business right now. So that's been really fun to kind of get off the ground and finally out there, and we're seeing lots of entries already.
Mm-hmm. So Matt's just been doing all of the celebrating and the schmoozing and getting to know people. Sidhi, what have you been up to?
We recently finished the ED's exclusive AI series. So I've been working on this report, which quite well summarizes the entire series. It's a one-stop place for our audiences to read the entire series. They want to kind of that, and then a lot of COP stuff as well. So I've been working on a COP primer report for COP30, and kind of explains what's on the agenda, what to look out for, and like the key focus points that could be of interest for our audiences. So very report heavy for me, but yeah, I'd say COP's also taking up a lot of my headspace, but then while we're sort of waiting for it, it feels like a hurry up and wait, but it will be upon us before we know it. But I've been covering a lot in the field of corporate nature strategies. We're now 2 years on from the TNFD launching, which I know you covered, Sidhi, and got a temperature check on that. And building on that, the Business for Nature Coalition looked at how mature businesses' nature strategies really are. So they looked at, and this was probably like one of the most interesting things I've read this month, strategies of more than 140 big businesses across the world. So not just like your European businesses. And the good news is that most of them now have a solid foundation to a nature strategy rather than just making wifty-wafty claims. 2/3 have smart targets for 2030 or sooner. But there's still some gaps to be closed. I'd say if this was a report card, it would say could do better.
only 1 in 10 companies have any long-term targets for 2050, and 6 in 10 still don't measure and disclose their nature-related opportunities. So as we look ahead to sort of the big opportunities for the last few weeks of the year here, the big opportunities in COP, nature is a big focus, and that's what I wanted to focus on with our first guest interview for this episode. So while Matt was away on his staycation and Sidhi was squirreling away on her reports, I spoke with Holly Story and Nick Heasman at National Parks Partnerships about the untapped opportunity which the private sector has to support nature restoration and conservation at scale in the UK, while avoiding common concerns about greenwashing. So here is our first guest interview in full. Yes, so as we'll have mentioned in the studio, it is an absolute pleasure to be speaking to experts at the national parks for this next part of the podcast, which is all about nature-based solutions in the UK. I'm delighted to have on the line with me Holly Story, who is the head of nature-based solutions at National Parks Partnerships, and Nick Heasman, who is the countryside and policymaker at the South Downs National Park. Thank you both so much for your time. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us, sir. I've been looking forward to this.
No, thank you very much both for sparing the time. I'd love to just give you both a chance to introduce yourself and your organisation in your own words. So Holly, can I start with yourself?
Yeah, no problem. So as you said, I head up the nature-based solutions team at National Parks Partnerships, or NPP for short. National Parks Partnerships was established back in 2016, and we exist to create and to manage partnerships between the UK national parks and commercial partners. So we work very closely with all of the 15 UK national parks, so that's in England, Scotland and Wales, and we help them to increase the pace and the impact of their work, and that's through kind of fostering both collaboration between the UK national parks, but also with the private sector and attracting private finance into nature-based solutions in the parks. So our focus in the NBS team is very much on those projects that have the potential to drive nature recovery and climate action at scale, and also to support local communities. And a key way of how we do that is through our Revere collaboration, which is our collaboration with Palladium. And that really brings together Palladium's expertise in green finance and project development with our national parks network and our land management knowledge as well, and the expertise of the teams on the ground. So it's been a really fruitful collaboration, and has produced some fantastic projects over the last few years, and that's included some projects in the South Downs National Park with Nick and the team, and in particular our Woodland creation project there, which we'll talk more about today.
Great. And Nick, can I come to you for an introduction too?
Yeah, absolutely. We're one of the 15 national parks, South Downs National Park, so we've been around for just over 15 years now. It was one of the original national parks put forward in the 1930s, and then after the Second World War, it was decided the South Downs didn't quite meet the criteria, so it was created as AONB, which we now call National Landscape. So the national park really sort of came into being only in the last 15 years, but we sit as the third largest national park in the UK, 119,000 population within the national park, so much higher. And then it's really fascinating area, being that close to London, that close to the South Coast development. So we've been working collaboratively. We're very much about enabling, facilitating, adding value. We work really closely with lots of landowners, organisations, communities, businesses. So we're all about partnership, this national park, and coming out of a different genesis, I'd say, than some of the other national parks. So it's still a little bit of a new kid on the block relatively. And so what's really key about our work is adding that value, trying to pioneer things. And we'll, that's some of the discussion today, and how we interrelate with Holly and the team at National Parks Partnership and Palladium under the banner of Veer. It seems to suit us really well, and that collaborative working is what we're all about to achieve delivery.
Great, and we here at EDie are definitely biased because South Downs is our local national park as well. So great to be learning a bit more about the great work that's going on just up the road from us. But Holly, before we get into that project specifically, I'd like to just dig into why nature-based solutions are so important for the future of the parks, and how exactly you and the team are working to grow them and offer the resulting credits.
Well, I think first of all, nature recovery and action towards kind of mitigating but also adapting to climate change are really at the top of the list of priorities across our national parks family. There are some very ambitious targets that have been set at government level, UK level, but also internationally, the 30 by 30 targets most notably, and others. And the level of public funding that's been committed for us to work towards those targets is not going to be enough to deliver them, and to deliver them at the timescales that we're looking to, because these are really now quite urgent responses that are needed, and we need to kind of accelerate and scale up the work that we do in these areas. There's a finance gap there, and we're working to try and help fill that. At the same time, we know that businesses have their own ambitious targets to meet, and they're considering their own kind of nature and climate impact, their interdependencies, their risks, increasingly looking at supply chain risks, for example, and they're looking to nature-based solutions to try and address those challenges. So our role really is to try and align those two things, those opportunities really, so that we can help to bring that much needed funding into the parks to help them get on with the really important work that they need to do and deliver those benefits for nature, but also for people as well, and the communities, but also the many visitors that they host every year, as Nick will be very well aware of, but also to provide those solutions for corporates and investors as well, who are looking to address their own requirements and meet their net zero targets and so on. So the detail of really how we do that at project level varies quite a bit. It's not always about credits, but where it is, we really try to ensure that they are of the highest integrity and ethical standards for both sides, really. I think that's in everybody's interests, and to make sure that the outcomes that come from those projects are very much aligned with the kind of long-term strategic vision that national parks have for their landscapes.
And I know that the parks have been working on a range of woodland and peatland projects under this for a number of years now. So Nick, could I zoom in on what that looks like in practice? So can you tell us a little bit more about what's been going on in the South Downs with the Woodland Carbon Project specifically?
Yeah, sure. Over the last couple of years, we've been working really closely with the Revere project, but the South Downs itself is the most wooded national park in England and Wales, 24%. So that's double the UK average cover, which is great. So we're starting at a really good place, and half of that is ancient woodland. So it really shows how special it is. But in that woodland type, we have, coniferous commercial forests, sweet chestnut, coppice, ancient woodland, yew woodlands, and all sorts of different character in that landscape. And what we're really about is expanding woodland, expanding that opportunity, and moving towards, some of those pressures that we've been mentioning about nature recovery and climate change mitigation, clean water, access, health and well-being, and all those interrelating elements. Woodland delivers so much. It can deliver carbon, yes, we know that, but it can deliver so much. And so at the National Park, we've been really keen to expand on that. And we have our own campaign to renature 33% of space in the National Park by 2030. We're very focused on interventions of nature, which are at scale and very much aligned with the principles of Sir John Lawton. So bigger, better, more joined up. So connecting those woodland spaces together, buffering those ancient woodland blocks, creating those habitat corridors. And I think it's coming at a time where there's enormous capacity post the Common Agricultural Policy reform, diversification for farm businesses and landowners, consolidation of what the good ground is and what is good land to produce food. Timber, we are the largest importer of timber, I think second largest importer of timber globally. So we also need to think about timber security alongside food security and climate change mitigation, and also the volatility we're seeing at the moment of traditional stewardship schemes that are secured through government funding. It's highly competitive, and Elms has really struggled to replicate the funding levels where it was before. So the Woodland Carbon Project has been something that we've been really focused on. How do we scale it up? How do we do something really ambitious? And we're looking at 1,000+ hectares of putting the right tree in the right place and connected woodland. And we're looking to achieve that with landowners, with the foresters, with the woodland agents, with those communities. And that's our USP, is that it's very bottom up, it's very locally focused, and we want to create woodland that's not just there to chuck it in and that'll do some carbon, thanks very much. It's about leaving a real legacy in that landscape, which kind of emulates that sort of circular economy, that local collectiveness and responsibility that we have within the national park. And it's brilliant to work alongside some of these people that I've spent 25 years working in the South Downs National Park. I'm born and bred in the South Downs and trace my ancestors to way back when. So they're helping me along this journey, I think, sometimes. But I think it's lovely having those relationships you built up and that level of trust. And that's something that we're really quite proud of and something we want to work together. And we hope if we can pioneer the projects here in the South Downs, that we can be a cradle for nature and nature finance innovation in all the other national parks across the UK.
Yeah, it makes our job really easy as well, in that, when we're talking to corporates or potential investors about the projects that we're working on, you can tell just from hearing Nick speak about it there how much this project is really rooted in kind of that long-term vision for the landscape and the really holistic nature of how the national park kind of steward that landscape. And so when we're talking about how the projects that we are involved in deliver additional benefits for biodiversity or for water or for local communities or increasing access, they're not just extra nice to have bits that we've tacked on because we know people are looking for them. They're really baked in from the very beginning into the project design, and that's the huge benefit of having Nick and his team and all the expertise that they bring and their connections to the local communities. Having these projects that have come out of that type of knowledge and relationships means those kind of co-benefits really do come as part of the package. They're not kind of afterthoughts, which, as I say, makes our job much easier, which is great.
I can imagine, and I see from speaking to sort of like ESG, sustainability, climate project managers in my job, they face quite a bit of a minefield in deciding how to create and deliver like a credible net zero or nature strategy, and they might, with the very best will in the world, go down the most popular route, source credits from like mega projects overseas, but then get hit with credibility concerns later. There'll be a scandal in the press and they'll be asked about double counting, additionality, permanence. So Holly, are you getting businesses come to you with these concerns at the moment?
Yeah, I think it is making people think again about where they're sourcing their carbon and looking to UK projects. I mean, we recognise that for big global businesses, it's likely that they'll be looking to acquire carbon as part of kind of a wider portfolio approach, and there's many good reasons for that. It might be necessary to manage risk and also to meet their needs in terms of volumes or timescales. That is one thing in terms of the lovely native biodiverse woodlands that we're creating in projects like this. One of their characteristics is that they will take time to mature. And the other thing is that a key part of how we work is we don't work on land acquisition. We work in collaboration with existing farmers and landowners. And again, that can take more time. So our credits will be really coming into their own in kind of 15, 25 years time, in that type of time period. And that means that for shorter term, higher volume targets, we might not be able to hit those needs through a woodland creation project, for example. There might be other solutions to that, looking at peatland restoration projects and other things. But yes, we recognise that people will likely be looking at that type of portfolio approach, and that UK carbon then needs to have a particular role and a strength within that portfolio. And for me, that comes back to the ability to be a more holistic and kind of tangible set of outcomes coming from the project that sit on top of just that pure carbon benefit. And part of that as well is around the ability to really physically connect with those projects through engagement and volunteering, for example. In its simplest terms, that's a great antidote to skepticism and uncertainty around the outcomes of these projects, is to be able to actually physically go and see and experience them, to be part of the planting of the trees and so on. But of course, on top of that, we're looking at how we can provide additional technical monitoring and verification for our project. So as well as being verified by the Woodland Carbon Code, which is obviously a very rigorous government-backed code that sets high standards for principles such as additionality and permanence, for example, we can also introduce our own additional monitoring activities, and all of our projects being guided and overseen by the national parks teams gives us options to do that and to make sure that they are really being delivered to high standards, and that the outcomes that we talk about in terms of biodiversity and social outcomes and so on are overseen and well evidenced, and also rigorously protected kind of into the future as well. So although they sometimes are talked about as kind of the softer benefits, it's just as important to ensure that they are being monitored and assured over time as well.
Got it. I was going to say, like, monitoring, assurance and data is definitely the language of business, but when you come down to things like holistic benefits, long-term thinking, resilience, it's not necessarily second nature to everyone. They're thinking in sort of 3 to 5 year business cycles. So Nick, when you're looking out to a project that's going on, 15, 20, 25 years, how are you thinking about this sort of holistic approach and this resilience over time, especially because the climate's already different than it would have been 25 years ago, and I'm sure it'll be different again in the years to come?
Yeah, I mean, I'm chartered forester, and I started at 16 working for the local forestry commission down the road, and for me it was been a fascinating career that you're always thinking longer timelines. You're always thinking, well, if I plant something now, what's it going to be? So very much the design of that and the influence of that is thinking about climate change mitigation, what sort of weather we're going to be getting. We've just had 2 very, very wet winters, but then we've been followed by a drought. And so there's techniques which we're adapting about tree establishment to ensure those trees are going to be in the best possible way. So the timing of the planting, the selection of the seed, where those young trees are coming from, and the techniques used to establish as well. And what we want to do is it's very much about large scale. That's what we're aiming to achieve. There is stewardship, there is England Woodland Creation Offer, but in the south of England, large scale woodland planting is quite rare. And the scale we're looking at would be the largest woodland planting in the south and southeast for hundreds of years, probably at the birth of the Forestry Commission in 1918 after the First War. So that's it's really significant, and we're really keen to align, the national parks aspirations, that long term, with sort of companies and businesses that share that ambition of scale. They might be signed up to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. They might have really clear ideas and actions about what they're hoping to achieve in terms of sense of belonging for their staff and staff retention, being proud to work with a company, being proud to be associated with that. And we can offer, and Holly mentioned some of this about the accessibility. We can show you, see the tree, it's literally there. You can come and see it, you can be involved in it. We can offer volunteering experiences, walks out with our rangers to understand more about the how these trees are enhancing the wider ecology in that landscape. The traceability of it, really key. And I think the integrity of the quality assurance, so we're working within a fantastic framework that the UK has. Holly mentioned the Woodland Carbon Code, the England Woodland Creation Offer. We're very lucky to have the headquarters of the Forestry Commission at Alice Holt within the South Downs National Park. So their team are really close beside us, which is great. And I think it's that sort of leaving a legacy, that long term, is really different these days, isn't it? Sort of, we're so quite short term. So I think it's so exciting to come back to that position of we're planting a tree today for the future. And that's quite an empowering thing at a difficult time when I think we all can feel quite sort of anxious about the world and what's within our gift, and be able to do that. And I think offering hope is a really powerful message, and that's what we're aiming to do, as well as giving that tangible, quantifiable benefit of being able to say, look, that's your carbon, there it is, it's not going to change, and by the way, it's adding all these benefits. Holly, I can see you nodding away here, and because I know we're very much kindred spirits on this.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, what's encouraging in talking to businesses about how they're thinking about net zero is firstly that people are focused on reducing their own emissions first and foremost, which we would absolutely support, and that sometimes that then means that they're looking further ahead into the future for when they might look to be acquiring carbon credits or needing those verified units to use in their own reporting. One thing I would say around that is that if you know that you have that need in the future, I think businesses should still be thinking now about how they can get involved with these projects and start securing those credits now so that they will be available to them in the future. So we're looking, for example, at working with businesses on setting up forward purchase agreements, so effectively a kind of an agreement to purchase those credits in the future as they mature, or on purchasing PRUs today so that when they're then verified in the future, they're then ready and available to you. Because otherwise the risk is that waiting until your timescales are much more constrained is that there'll be a lot more pressure in the market. Potentially prices might have changed compared to what they are today, and you might have less flexibility in terms of being able to source those credits from a project that you are really confident in and has all those amazing co-benefits that we've been talking about. So, and also to be conscious that in the UK setting, there are longer timescales associated with these habitats being created and maturing and working in the collaborative way that we do, and does take more time. So yeah, I'd say even though these timescales for when the credits are going to be verified and actually used in your reporting might seem way down the line today, it's quite important to be thinking now about how you can secure them for your use in the future.
Yeah, as you've said, Holly, the markets here are changing all the time, and we are seeing more and more forward purchase agreements. So if there are businesses out there that are listening and want more information on this, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can contact us through our website, which is www.revere.eco, or contact myself or one of the team. So I'm on holly.story@nationalparks.co.uk, and happy to take any inquiries and talk to anybody who might be interested in these kind of really exciting opportunities, both through the South Downs project, but our wider project portfolio as well.
Great. And just to finish, I'd love to come on to essentially like a bigger vision for this. So we've seen from this that the Parks and Palladium are doing great work on investing in peatland restoration and creation, woodland creation and expansion. But as you've mentioned, Holly, the level of funding that's coming from public sources to do this isn't enough to get the UK on track to where we need to be, and the level of private finance isn't quite there yet. So I'd love to get your thoughts on what more can be done to encourage additional investment in woodlands, in peatlands, to sort of take these projects and make them more of the norm, more widespread.
Yeah, it's a really difficult challenge, and I think there's been a huge amount of effort and energy over the last few years, you know, from within our work through the Revere collaboration, but also more widely in the sector, to make sure that we're bringing forwards both the supply of projects that we need and the caliber of projects that we need to make a real impact, but also the demand for credits or units that are being created, the benefits that are being created, and bringing those two things to the table at the same time with aligned objectives is difficult. Currently, the projects that we're working on tend to take a blended finance approach. So we are making use of public funding, as Nick mentioned earlier, through the England Woodland Creation Offer as part of this. And that is really key in making the project financially viable. But I think it's important for us to think collectively about how we can create some stronger, longer term demand signals in this space to really attract more people into it and give people more confidence in engaging with carbon, but also other nature markets as well. And part of that is policy and kind of long-term commitment from government to these markets. But I think it's also about sharing more knowledge and being more collaborative between the buy side and the sell side, if you like, to make sure that we're developing projects that are the types of solutions that businesses and investors want to see coming forwards, but also that the requirements that they're coming to the table with are realistic given the realities of developing and delivering nature-based solutions in the UK.
Yeah, I think I'd love to see the UK government sort of incentivise UK carbon over sort of purchasing elsewhere because of the benefits, the co-benefits that we've described. I know VAT is now on sort of UK carbon, and sort of whether that's a good thing or not. I think we should be looking at how we get that security, that incentive. It's a big commitment for a landowner to say, right, I'm going to put down woodland, and that's that land use going to be for probably in perpetuity, and so that they're not going to reach their on the open woodland carbon market sort of 15 years, and so that's when it comes to maturity. And I think there's a sort of confidence role here the government could play. They're creating a great framework. The England Woodland Carbon Code is fantastic. The England Wood Creation Offer is brilliant. The grants are sort of great, but it's not enough really to tip it at that point. And I see a lot of local governments and central governments making some very grand targets, carbon neutral by 2030. I don't see any action, and I don't see that being achievable. And so I would sort of say, well, is there not a role for central government then to help and make those purchases and those upfront purchases? And actually it's investment. I see it as an investment. We often talk about people saying trying to get money out of nature. We've been borrowing from the Bank of Nature for generations. We're overdrawn, and we've got credit cards, and we're maxed out to the limit. We keep taking off nature. What about investing at scale, putting it back, and actually seeing some real action? And we could target then these really strategic sort of sites and putting right tree in the right place, or encouraging that sort of that investment. And green finance is that it is financially investment that will come back and pay us double. It will pay us, particularly in terms of looking at the climate change and what we're seeing in terms of mitigation around sort of where we've had this drought and deluge as we had, and looking at river catchments, looking at areas for people's health and well-being around villages and towns and cities. And I think it's there is a market there, it's proven. Just love to see a little more leadership in that area. That would be my wish, I think.
It sounds like there's a lot of great work already underway with some financiers and in some locations, but huge opportunity still there to keep our eyes on. So thank you both so much for sharing all of your knowledge and your insights on this podcast. Thank you, Holly. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks very much, Sarah.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you once again to Holly and Nick for their time. We're going to take a short break now. Join us after the jingle when we'll be talking about identifying and tackling greenwashing in consumer goods. Hello and welcome back to Sustainability Uncovered with me, Sarah, and also with Matt.
Hello.
And with Sidhi.
Hello.
So I'm doing a bit of an ungraceful segue here. After looking at nature investments in the first half and looking at greenwashing that can sometimes be a risk with nature-related credits and claims, we're going to pivot to look at another kind of greenwashing, so specifically on-pack labels with consumer-facing goods. So this is probably something that all three of us have seen and all of our listeners have seen, because it's estimated that across Europe, 3/4 of products on the market currently have some sort of ESG claim on the packet or on the advert, and the EU has heard evidence that more than half of them are vague or misleading. So I wanted to ask you guys what you think is the worst instance of this that you've ever seen, either when you're shopping or you're looking online.
I don't know if I have a worst instance. Nothing really springs to mind. I'm kind of just a grab and go type of shopper. I know I don't expand my horizons when it comes to products. I grab what I know I'm going to have and go. But I am trying to be more sustainably conscious. I do feel though the claims that kind of make me kind of, I suppose, roll my eyes a little bit, or at least stop and question it, have historically been ocean plastics. I feel there was a real that was a real trend at one point where everything was, this is made from ocean plastics, and I was like, you're treating the symptoms, not the cause there. And it was kind of well intentioned, but also felt a little bit kind of, what's what I'm looking for, like lacking in sincerity in terms of what they were really trying to do.
And you tell people that the plastic might not necessarily have come from the ocean.
Yeah.
There was just chance that it might have.
It was on its way.
Yeah.
It's like, well, okay, great. So that kind of grind me. And then compostable, I always felt was just an absolute minefield as to what that meant. Was it industrial compostable? Could it actually be open compostable? Does it, just because it composts, does it even break down naturally? So those are the ones that I was definitely most wary of. And then to flip your question, and I may just want to get on my soapbox for a minute and just moan. And I don't know if this is a sustainability issue or not, but in changes to packaging, the one that really, really is kind of just annoying me at the moment is hummus pots.
No double lid.
No double lid.
You mentioned this before.
I bring it up all the time because it's infuriating. I also
and because he has hummus for lunch most days.
I eat a lot of hummus. But they used to get the double lid so you could reseal it. And now it's just flimsy, soft plastic, which still isn't necessarily recycled everywhere. I know the changes are coming in for EPR to change that right now. But I have a theory that it contributes to more food waste. So less packaging, but may correlate with bigger food waste, because it's just so hard to keep the hummus in a pot where a flimsy lid, where once you open it you can't really reseal it. It can just go everywhere. You're inclined to lean it. It goes off quicker.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Whoever's operating big hummus right now, whoever's overseeing those decisions, I just want to know whether that's actually like how sustainable that is.
Okay, this can be our topic for January. So hummus packaging makers, get in touch. Sidhi, what about you? What's the worst like greenwashing that you've seen on a packet?
Probably also hummus, right?
Yes. No, but I'm not gonna name the brand, but I recently bought this like chocolate box, and the company claimed to be carbon neutral because they were using offsetting. But what really annoyed me is that the entire packaging was non-recyclable. Like not even the outer box, like nothing. And like, yeah, it just really made me angry because you're claiming to be carbon neutral, but you haven't even started like the most basic things, but you're just offsetting everything to begin with. So I guess, yeah, when I see stuff like that.
So there's a word for that, isn't there? It's like green lighting, is it? Where you focus on one part of sustainability.
Right.
Like, yeah, look, we're carbon neutral, or however great that is. Don't worry that our products can't be recycled, but look at the good stuff we're doing, right?
Yeah. So sort of like spotlight, ex greenwashing. For me, I'd say I've seen this in like the supermarkets and in your sort of Boots, Superdrugs. I've seen a lot of when you go to pick up like a shower gel or a shampoo, it says, I'm a green bottle. And then you turn it over and it says 30% recycled plastic. And it's like, so you just wanted to avoid the UK plastic tax and you're going to get in trouble for that claim. So I think two of us talked about food, but, you know, this is a problem in things like home cleaning, body cleaning, beauty. So for this next part of the podcast, I spoke to an organisation working to mainstream more data-driven environmental labels in the beauty industry, a group called the EcoBeautyScore Consortium, which is working with big brands like Neutrogena and L'Oreal to roll out a new impact labelling scheme. So it's the same across various brands and gives each product a grade based on life cycle analysis data across 16 impacts, so no one can get away with green lighting under this. So to learn a bit more about how that project has taken shape behind the scenes and how we could somehow soon compare green claims on our beauty products, I spoke with the consortium's head of communications, Rebekah Lees. Thank you so much for your time, Rebekah. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you very much for taking the time. I guess the obvious place to start is introduction, so it would be great to hear a little bit more about the association and your role within it.
Yes, absolutely. So the EcoBeautyScore is a not-for-profit association. It was set up at the start of this year, but it's an initiative that's been going on for the past 4 years. So originally created in 2021 as an industry consortium. Since this time, we've been working with more than 70 different players across the cosmetics and personal care industry and from across the globe, from the large household names that you would have heard of to more smaller niche brands. And essentially, they've all come together with a shared vision, which is to create one single framework for how you measure the environmental impact of cosmetics and personal care products, and one consistent way of how you communicate that to consumers. Primarily wanting to avoid, what we have seen happen in other industries like the food industry, the apparel industry, where there's been a proliferation of different labels that have cropped up. each with different methodologies, each with a different way of communicating to consumers, which doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help a consumer make a meaningful comparison across products. So really, we've spent the past 4 years creating the first global science-based environmental scoring system for cosmetics and the personal care industry.
Great. And I was going to ask why we need that. And I know you've mentioned that there are so many confusing and conflicting on-pack claims in other sectors. I've seen it a lot in snacks and home cleaning. Is this something that you guys were seeing in beauty before as well?
Yes, I mean, I'm sure we've all been aware of numerous greenwashing claims in this industry and in other, FMCG type industries. It's been a bit of it's fair to say, wild west of claims out there. Brands claiming green, clean, eco-friendly, often not backed up by any clear data or a consistent standard. And unhelpfully, that's basically led to confusion and mistrust amongst consumers. We've seen with the data that half of European consumers are now skeptical of brands' sustainability claims and suspecting that they don't accurately reflect the real environmental impact of products. So that was why we've come about. We saw a gap in the market for a standardized, reliable system for measuring and communicating the environmental impact to consumers.
Great. And we at EDie, we covered the launch of that system, that framework, that label earlier this year. And I know it's probably one of those things where you sort of see the big shiny announcement at the end. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about the work behind the scenes and hear about, I think you said it took a few years to develop it. So what was that journey like and who else was involved in it? Yes,
it has been a journey, that's for sure. So as you can imagine, with bringing 70 plus different stakeholders together, that's both brands, as I said, large and small, but also trade associations. So we've worked also with the national and the regional trade associations for the cosmetics industry. Part of the work has been in aligning such a large stakeholder group as that. As you can imagine, different brands with different priorities, different perspectives, different product portfolios, in order to get them all converging in the same direction. That inevitably takes time. It has been helped by there being that ultimate shared vision, but that needs to translate down into the details. But also a lot of the time that we have spent over the past 4 years has been building a robust methodology. So it's been critical for us from the outset that whatever we develop is science-based and it's as robust as possible. So we have built a methodology that's based on LCA, so life cycle assessment, and more specifically aligned with the PEF, so the product environmental footprint methodology of the European Commission. As you'll probably know, it is seen as the gold standard of how to measure the environmental impact of a product. But that said, it's not just a case of, take it off the shelf and here we go for the cosmetics industry. A lot of work has gone into building out the ingredients database that sits underneath that methodology. So although PEF is a great framework to start with, it only covered, we found, about 30% of the ingredients that are included in the cosmetics, in cosmetics products. So we've put a lot of work in building out an ingredients database of the most commonly occurring ingredients and the most impactful ingredients that are found in cosmetics. So really building out as robust as possible method and framework for measuring environmental impact.
Yeah, when we look at any industry really trying to get really good footprint information, it is that sort of very specific data that people seem to fall down on. So with that in mind, is this why it was important to include those trade bodies and those brands? What did they bring to the table in terms of data, and what else did they bring to the table during that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So important to work with the brands first and foremost, because part of what we're hoping to achieve is to shift the whole industry in terms of reducing the impact, the footprint of the industry. So first of all, you need to work with the brands in order to do that. Secondly, if we are wanting to provide to consumers, here is a reliable indication of the environmental impact of your products, you need to footprint that product. In order to footprint that product, you need access to the data. You need access to the ingredient list, the formulation that's gone into that product, the packaging components that the product is made of. So really important to work with the industry to get access to that data. As I say, in terms of building out the ingredient database, a lot of the companies had their own data to be able to submit to be able to develop the emission factors for those ingredients and the activity data for the ingredient database. But also we've worked with numerous experts in, LCA, in consumer insights, in environmental and cosmetic science. So a whole wealth of different experts have gone into developing our framework. And then lastly, you mentioned the trade bodies there. They have been a really important conduit for us as well to represent us for their members. The cosmetics industry is hugely fragmented. I've said we've worked with 70 of the global players from around the world, but there are hundreds or if not thousands of really small and medium-sized brands out there. So the trade bodies have been a really important vehicle to be able to provide access to EcoBeautyScore where maybe they have not had the time or the resources themselves to be directly involved.
Yeah, I can imagine that it is tricky to bring together such a fragmented industry, as you say, in different product categories, different countries, and some of those really small brands. But we've talked quite a lot there about the business to business stuff that's been going on at the association, and I'd love to talk about the consumer communications and what you've learned about what people are looking for when they're shopping. So what have you learned in this process about communicating sustainability to consumers and designing an eco label that people will actually be able to understand?
First off, plenty we've learned. So there's been lots of lessons along the way. In terms of communicating environmental impact, we knew from the outset that we couldn't simply just give the consumer the footprint. So here is the absolute value of the footprint of your product. It's pretty meaningless. It doesn't provide any context, and without other products to hand, it doesn't really make comparison possible from product to product. So we knew we had to translate the footprint value into some sort of understandable scale. Now we have, as you know, landed on an A to E scale, but we started out with a blank sheet of paper. You could have had a 0 to 100 score, could have had a high, medium, low traffic light system. We could have had a 1 to 5 scale. We've done various rounds of consumer testing to see which of these different scoring scales resonates best, is most instinctively understood by consumers. And along the way, we found out various issues with different approaches. So for example, with the 0 to 100 score, and consumers were questioning, okay, so if we've got the higher the number within that 0 to 100, does that mean a higher impact, or does that mean a better score? It's not instinctively understandable. With the high, medium, low traffic light type system, so just 3 performance classes, we found that actually this would prove challenging for the brands to be able to demonstrate progress. So where they are making an effort to improve the eco design of their products, to reduce the footprint of their products, they want to be able to demonstrate that to consumers. And if you've only got 3 performance classes in your scale, you have to make a massive leap in improvement to be able to demonstrate with an improved score there. So various different insights picked up along the way in terms of what is the best communication mechanism, and really the A to E scale is the one that performed best in our tests. It was the most universally understood in the 4 different markets where we tested. So we tested in France, the US, China, and Brazil. Importantly, lots of different languages across there, and this scale was universally understood regardless of languages. We also know from the rounds of consumer testing that we've done that the EcoBeautyScore as a concept is welcomed by consumers. They do want to understand the environmental impact of the products that they're purchasing. But interestingly, what they told us is it's not going to be the sole decision-making criteria for them. At the end of the day, there is still brand loyalty, there's still product performance, there's still price, are incredibly important decisions that go into, whether they buy a product or not. But they welcomed having knowledge of environmental impact within that mix of other criteria to help them make a decision on whether to buy a product or not, or whether to perhaps substitute one product for another. It's early days for us in terms of capturing real world insight from the scores that are already published now on real life products. But we know from the testing that we did that more than 2/3 of the consumers tested said that the label would help to build trust, and they do intend to consider it when purchasing products. So we're hopeful that that's what we see transpire in the data.
Got it. That makes complete sense. It's definitely what I've seen with like food, restaurants and food catering. They've seen people still in the first instance going for their normal choice, but I've seen what Unbrand's is that it opens up that dialogue that the customer would then say, why is your burger scored so lowly? What are you doing to make it better? So is this something that you see happening as well, that the brands might either productively with customers or maybe even preemptively think about this once they get their scores back?
Yeah, absolutely. The score is just the start. It's, that's the start of the storytelling that the brands then need to do. We know that, again, from the testing, we found that if a consumer said if their favorite brand scored a D score, it's not going to stop them in the first instance from purchasing that product. But what it does do is give them confidence that the brand is taking sustainability seriously and that they're doing something to improve that D score. So this provides a platform for the brand to be able to tell that story, take the consumer on the journey with them and explain, okay, here's why this product is a D score and here's what we're doing about it to move that up to a C and possibly higher. So it provides a platform for storytelling. We know that data informs, but stories inspire. And so what we're doing is providing the data, and then the brands, it's then their role to provide that context and the storytelling around it.
Got it. And Rebekah, I wanted to come back to something you said on comparability, which is that essentially a label is useless unless people can compare apples to apples. And with that in mind, a lot of people are supportive of mandatory eco labeling. So we get to the point that we're essentially at with food. So you buy food in the UK, on the front it will have calories, protein, salt, sugar, and possibly some traffic lights as well. So do you think that this is coming in the future? And if not, what do you think the voluntary future of schemes like this look like?
Yeah, it's a really important question, and obviously one we're constantly considering, because as an industry, we haven't waited for the regulation to come. The industry are taking this on themselves to introduce this environmental labelling scheme pre any regulation. What we have seen is there is a voluntary labelling scheme that has literally just come into force in France, launched by the French government for the apparel industry. And they have said that they intend to roll it out to other sectors in future. This scheme is voluntary, but interestingly, they have a mechanism whereby if a brand doesn't voluntarily publish their score, then other third parties can apply for the data to be able to measure and then publish their score for them. Although they're officially saying it's voluntary, there is a real sort of incentive there to voluntarily publish their score. And we know that the EU have been looking to introduce a similar scheme across the whole bloc. So I wouldn't be surprised if eco-labelling does become mandatory within the EU region in the not too distant future. Though that said, the Commission have also recently announced that the step back from the Green Claims Directive, which would have created much needed legislation to tackle the issue of greenwashing. So we'll see if it does come down the line in terms of being mandatory. For the moment, the EcoBeautyScore is a voluntary scheme, so it's up to brands if they choose to use the EcoBeautyScore scoring platform and publish their scores for consumers. We are seeing some pioneering brands already starting to publish their scores. The likes of Garnier, Nivea, Eucerin, Neutrogena, they're all publishing their product scores. And importantly, not just the A and B scores, A through to E scores. That is part of the rules that brands sign up to, is that they're not allowed to purely publish and only their A and B scores. So we'll see. We're certainly hopeful that the industry voluntarily embracing it, snowballs and starts to become the norm. It becomes the standard.
Great. Well, it looks like whatever is happening, there is a future there of more accountability for brands and also some more opportunities for them on data and storytelling alike. So thank you so much, Rebekah, for coming on and telling us a little bit more about the work that you've been up to.
No problem. Pleasure.
Yes, huge thank you to Rebekah for her time once again. That is all of our guest interview features for this episode, but before we sign off, I wanted to offer a preview of what we've got coming up for COP. So in terms of podcasts, we are ramping up to one show a day starting on November 6th and running until the COP closes, thankfully with one Sunday off, which I hope that you'll forgive us for. And we'll be co-hosting that podcast called COP30 Covered with Springwise, our sister title which specialises in clean tech innovation. So you can find us and subscribe by searching for COP30 Covered on your favourite podcast platform. Meanwhile, we've got other stuff coming from the rest of the team, right? So Matt, what are you working on?
Yeah, so our COP coverage is going to be quite comprehensive. The daily podcast, daily roundup for our members as well, and daily editorial digest each evening. So as and when the sun sets on the Amazon for the evening, we will be there, not in the Amazon, but at our desks, writing up what's happened and providing a bit of narrative around this COP. I'm sure you guys would agree that half the interesting stuff we get to write about COP is not necessarily what's announced, but what kind of just goes on, the kind of machine of COP and how it runs and whether it's fit for purpose. And I think alongside all of the initiatives and progress reports that get launched, I think that's going to be a big thing to look out for, whether this kind of rumblings that maybe a global climate summit doesn't quite do what it needs to do will still shaping up. So you can look out for our members get commentary on all of that as well. We're also going to be hosting a post-event webinar debrief, free to attend on the 25th of November. And I confirm speaker announcement is our very own Sarah George. Is going to be providing a bit of a digest as to what we saw and what the biggest kind of takeaways were, and we'll have some people that were out there as well providing their thoughts and reflections as to what that will mean for business moving ahead. And we're obviously hosting an in-person event in London for those who can't make it. So on the 20th of November, BBC Radio Theatre, which is a great venue. We are working with the BBC and with Planet Mark as well to host a business leaders forum for any sustainability professional that wants to hear live from Brazil. We're going to be live feeding out there to some of the BBC correspondents. We're going to have a high-level panel discussion and lots of networking opportunities as well to make sense of this big global accord. So quite a lot to deliver in the next couple of weeks.
And Sidhi, before we even get to that sort of end of COP point, you've got a special primer report, right?
Yeah, so the primer report will probably go live this week. Yes. Yeah. So I'm excited to share that with our readers. I think hopefully it is insightful and useful as a guide to navigate the COP, but at the same time, as Matt mentioned, we're gonna cover COP quite comprehensively, so I'll just suggest that our readers check our site kind of daily to catch any updates we might have for them.
Yeah, great. And into the evening as well. Don't necessarily have to wait for tomorrow. We're covering as live as we can in the sense of as stuff are announced. So we're hoping to be wrapped up by kind of 8 p.m. each evening, but make sure before you go and watch the traitors that you're checking out the EDie website as well.
Got it. So basically that's all of us begging you, please do not leave us alone for the next 3 weeks. We need your support. It's an absolute privilege to get to cover COPs, but it is very intensive, very long hours, very long documents to read through. So we'd better go and get prepping for all of that. But for this episode, it's a big thank you once again to National Parks Partnerships for sponsoring. And then it is a goodbye from Matt.
Goodbye.
A goodbye from Sidhi.
Goodbye.
And a goodbye from me. Goodbye.